Announcing a 9/11 style commission to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol. That just 2 days after the Senate acquitted former President Trump of inciting the violence over his big lie that the election was stolen. 7 Republican senators voting with Democrats to convict the president, not enough to meet the 2/3 threshold. Joining me now to discuss is Congressman from Colorado and former House impeachment manager Joe Neguse. Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate you joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be with you, Don.
So much to talk to you about. Let's start with the new news that we have here, and that is Speaker Pelosi wanting to set up this 9/11 type commission to investigate this further. What questions do you still have?
Well, I think it's an important step. I applaud the Speaker's decision. I suspect that there'll be bipartisan support for a 9/11 style commission that is independent, that can take a real close look at the vulnerabilities of the Capitol complex, potential security enhancements that need to be made into the future, assessing financial needs with respect to those investments. I think there are, a number of different parts of that inquiry that are going to be very important moving forward prospectively for securing our nation's capital. So I think it's an important step and certainly one that I support.
All right, let's go back a little bit, but not too far, just over the weekend, okay? Because there was a moment where it seemed like there might be witnesses in this impeachment trial, right? You succeeded in getting 7 Republicans to convict. Don't you think hearing from witnesses might have won over maybe a few more witnesses? I mean, a few more Republicans?
It's a fair question, Don, and I know a question that many have asked. I'd say this. I think the evidence that we presented during the course of this trial was overwhelming, and I think it's fairly clear that a majority of the United States Senate, obviously 57 senators, agreed with us that, applying an objective analysis, an impartial lens to the evidence we presented, that the president was guilty of the constitutional offense for which he was charged. But here's the interesting thing, and you played, of course, the minority leader's remarks. Many of the senators who voted to acquit the president have in effect conceded that we proved our case, that the evidence was sufficient to indicate that the president had committed the offense for which he was charged. So I don't think, as lead manager Raskin said, whether it was 5 more witnesses or 5,000 more witnesses, that it would have changed the ultimate outcome. As you said, there are some senators who chose to acquit the president on jurisdictional grounds, which, of course, had been settled on the very first day of the trial. And as you know, that was an issue that we successfully argued on that day. And for a body that purports to rely on precedent so heavily, the fact that they refused to do so in this instance, at least some of those senators, including the minority leader, is, of course, disappointing.
Did the White House play into any of that? Did you not call witnesses because the White House wanted the trial over?
I don't think that's the case. I certainly didn't have any conversations with the White House, and I'm not aware of any in that regard. It was really a balancing of the equities. I mean, as you know, lead manager Raskin essentially moved forward with a motion to have one witness testify, which was Congresswoman Herrera Butler, given the reporting that CNN had done just the evening before about the statement that she had issued that went to the heart of the president's state of mind and supported our theory of the case with respect to his culpability. And so that's the decision we made, was to proceed with trying to have her testify by video deposition. But it became clear that the president's counsel was willing to stipulate that statement be entered into the evidentiary record so that the United States Senate could consider it as part of its deliberations. That was important. And it was important for lead manager Raskin to be able to read that into evidence, read it for the American people to hear directly. And ultimately, given that fact, given that concession, we felt the most prudent course forward was to proceed. I also would just say, Don, because you covered it so extensively the last several years, it was clear that had we proceeded with some of the witnesses that folks have speculated about, it very well may have ended in litigation, where we would have to litigate subpoenas for months and perhaps years, as had been the case prior to this particular trial. So again, balancing the equities, it was clear, overwhelming evidence of the president's guilt. And of course, the fact that this was the most bipartisan impeachment vote in the history of our republic with respect to presidential impeachments is evidence of that.
Well, let me ask you this, because as an impeachment manager, this is probably not your concern, but as a politician, as a Democratic congressman, the MAGA land is celebrating. The former president said that his MAGA movement has only just begun. You know what he said about, the middle of Fifth Avenue. Is that basically what happened here? Because does this maybe on the backside give him more power than if you had just ignored him?
Look, I don't think that's the case, but at the end of the day, politics was not part of the calculus for us. I mean, this impeachment is a solemn tool under the Constitution that is only utilized to hold the president accountable when he's committed constitutional offenses. And this clearly was one of those cases, as the president incited an insurrection on January 6th. So we were duty bound to move forward as we did. And I also think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that 7 Republican senators voted to convict the president. That is unprecedented.
In very conservative southern states, which is very interesting to me.
That's precisely
I'm from
right.
Louisiana, and I'm shocked that a Louisiana senator would vote to convict Donald Trump.
I'm grateful. I mean, honestly, the courage that they showed to do the right thing, to choose country over party, to follow their conscience, I think is something we should all applaud, and it should give us some pause and I think, some optimism for the future. You
mentioned January 6th, and you warned when you were there doing your duty that it could happen again. What needs to be done now to deter anything like that, anything like what we saw in January? And are you worried about this March 4th and QAnon conspiracy where believers think that Trump will be back in the presidency?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about the prospects, for future violence. As I said during the Senate trial, that's something that I think is on the mind of many Americans. I think the inquiry that Speaker Pelosi has announced will be helpful in that regard, in terms of, again, assessing vulnerabilities and providing the Congress with recommendations that are tangible and concrete and that can move the needle in that respect. But I'd also say this, Don, because you played some of my remarks with respect to the impeachment trial and the fact that this was really born not out of hatred, but out of love for our country. One part of that clip that was not there was a quote that I quoted from Dr. King, something that has sustained me. I know you're familiar with it, which is that Dr. King once said that I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And that to me is something that I hope every American is thinking about right now. We're going to have to figure out a path forward to begin to talk to each other and listen to one another and find a way to ensure that political violence is not, the means to resolving our disagreements. It just can't be. And I'm going to work every day to make sure that that's not the case.
I hope the majority of Americans are listening to you. Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you. So make sure you watch. President Joe Biden is going to join Anderson live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in an exclusive presidential town hall. That is tomorrow at 9 Eastern. And then I'll be live right after my normal time or close to it. So make sure you tune in. And next, 7 Republican senators voting to convict Trump, some of them getting heat from Republicans back home. We'll talk about that. So what happens to the Republican Party now that the former president has been acquitted in his second impeachment trial? Well, Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell wants to move them away from Trump's grip, but Senator Lindsey Graham says it's still Trump's party.
He's excited about 2022, and I'm going to go down to talk with him next week, play a little golf in Florida. And I said, Mr. President, this MAGA movement needs to continue. We need to unite the party. Trump plus is the way back in 2022.
Oh, Lord. Well, one thing is certain. Republicans who voted to impeach and to convict are facing a lot of heat back home. I want to bring in now CNN political commentator Charlie Dent and CNN's senior political analyst John Avlon. Leave it to Lindsey Graham. Never disappoints, right? Good evening, gentlemen. Good to see both of you. John, you just heard my interview with the House impeachment manager Joe Neguse. Despite Trump's acquittal, they got 7 Republicans to vote for conviction. How will that rebuke go down in history?
It is the most bipartisan margin for any Senate impeachment trial of a president ever, by a lot. So it's not just that Donald Trump's got 50% of all the impeachments to date. Those 7, it didn't clear the threshold for conviction. That's never come close. But to have that much of a rebuke shows that there's still a backbone of the Republican Party that's willing to call out insurrection. And that's what's so insane, because there's literally nothing less conservative than a violent mob storming the Capitol. But those folks are taking the heat right now, but they will be viewed as profiles of courage in the eyes of history. No doubt about it.
7, though, John? Do you think that's a backbone? Maybe it's a vertebrae. I don't know, but I mean,
it's a couple of vertebrae.
Okay, got it. All right.
The beginning.
Yeah, Charlie, listen, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr is responding to the North Carolina GOP censuring him tonight for voting to convict Trump. Here's what he says. He said, It is truly a sad day for North Carolina Republicans. My party's leadership has chosen loyalty to one man over the core principles of the Republican Party and the founders of our great nation. How do you see this backlash against GOP leaders who voted against Trump?
Well, look at Arizona, Don. I mean, the brain trust of the Arizona GOP decided to censure Jeff Flake, Cindy McCain, and Governor Ducey, and then within a few days they lost 10,000 Republicans statewide. So they're shrinking their party. Many of these people are more concerned about, excommunicating heretics than they are about winning over converts. I have been sanctioned or censured, I should say, by county committees, once over marriage equality because I supported it, once over not being supportive of Trump enough. I mean, they said I was too hostile. I mean, who cares? I mean, these people are irrelevant. They think that somehow they're going to grow this party by embracing a disgraced, twice impeached man, a loser. He lost. And why do they think this is going to help? He cost them the Senate, he cost them the House. So why don't they double down on defeat? I mean, this makes absolutely no sense. I'm sure Pat Toomey's going to get his knuckles rapped for his vote, and all the rest of them are too. But it just shows you how detached from reality many of these state and local GOP committees are today in America.
It's really embarrassing. I mean, how can you be a member of the party and not be embarrassed by what happened and what these folks are doing? Go on, Charlie. What do you want to say?
And Don, I was going to say, look, and they wonder why there are GOP leaders out there talking about developing a new faction either within the party or outside, independent of the party, or even a new party. That's what they're going to do. The party's fractured, and they may split it up, and it may be hard to put it back together again as a consequence of this type of stupidity.
Who would want to have any sort of relationship or any sort of identity with the Looney Tunes party? Seriously, I mean, look, if your party, John, I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
If there was an insurrection and you had a president who was, always talking about conspiracy theories and trying to coerce people into finding votes, and who would want to be associated with that madness? It really is. It's become the Looney Tunes party. And the question is, how much power should a twice impeached one-term president have over the party? Go on, John.
A lot in a cult of personality. But that's the problem, right? I mean, what extremist groups and cults do is they focus on hunting for heretics because it's a way to enforce groupthink. That's a sign of the problem. But let's look at some real numbers. I mean, Charlie just started. 140,000 Republicans left the party nationwide in January alone. 50% of the country is now identified as independent. Almost 2/3 say it's time for a third party. Now, whether that's the far right breaking off, good riddance, or whether it's folks in the center trying to stand up and find new cross coalitions, the Constitution doesn't mention political parties. I heard you talking to Brother Chris earlier, and this idea that it's a purely binary choice for most folks doesn't fit the way they live or the way they think. And so it's about time that these parties realize it. And the more the Republican Party embraces the crazy, the more the few sane folks are going to stand up and say, why do I want to be part of that? Doesn't mean I've changed my beliefs. They've left me.
Yeah, well, speaking of, Charlie, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger voted to impeach, was censured by his party. And if that's not enough, according to the New York Times, 11 members of his family sent him a letter saying that he was in cahoots with, quote, the devil's army for breaking with Trump. I mean, what does all that tell you about the chances of the GOP breaking from Trump? I mean, wouldn't the devil's army be the people who were involved in the insurrection and those who made excuses for it? Shouldn't it be the other way around? But, geez, I mean, this is crazy.
It's beyond crazy. I was actually texting with Adam about this, and I said, Adam, I would have never thought you were tied to the devil. Maybe Satan's seed, but not the devil. But Adam, look, he's comfortable. He's comfortable in his own skin. He knows he did the right thing. He can take this. It doesn't bother him one bit. And by the way, speaking of crazy, going full crazy, we saw this in 2010 when during the Tea Party wave, some of these state committees decided to nominate some really wacky candidates. Do you remember Sharon Angle in Nevada?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Christine O'Donnell,
Yes.
the witch in Delaware?
Yes.
Richard Murdoch, it was in 2012 in Indiana. Oh, and I'm forgetting, Todd Aiken, legitimate rape. He's the one who brought that term to, made it popular. So we have these people who are on the fringe, and we used to call them the exotics. Well, they cost the Republicans the majority in the Senate. The GOP is going to go the same route. I mean, they already have Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're going to get more people like her who are going to try to become nominated. And in many cases, they're going to lose, but some will slip through and win in overly Republican districts. So bottom line is, this by going after the Kinzingers and the Cheneys and the Uptons and the Catkos, they're going after the very best of the Republican Party and many of the finest members of Congress that we have of either party. So I don't understand why these people want to torture the ones who win and who represent their constituents well, and to embrace these fringe elements. Makes no sense.
Yeah, I want a camera at the Kinzinger Thanksgiving, John Avalon.
But look, there are a lot of families being split up by this crazy right now. I mean, that's the real sad thing. But for any party that's trying, if Leader McCarthy's trying to say, I'm going to hold my party together by doing some moral equivalence between the Adam Kinzingers and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, there's no moral equivalence. Stop it. Yeah. Donald Trump lost the popular vote twice, people. Yeah. And you're going to isolate yourself, keep digging yourself in that hole. It's going to end badly for the Republican Party, and it's not good for the Republic either.
And listen, it's different with the family, but I mean, some friends are you consider them family members. I can't tell you how many friends I have who said, including myself, they've lost so many friends over especially this last sad episode. It's just, you cannot negotiate or try to have a sensible conversation or any kind of a relationship with someone who is not rooted in reality. And so I don't know how the politicians deal with it. I don't know how they negotiate with people who believe in QAnon or thinking it's okay to have an insurrection at the Capitol and make excuses for it. I just don't see it. Thank you, gents. See you soon.
Take care, man.
So he voted to acquit Trump. Then Leader Mitch McConnell dealing with the aftermath of his contradictions at Trump's impeachment trial, blaming the former president for the riot just minutes after voting to acquit. Mitch McConnell now vowing to focus on electability over loyalty to Trump. But some Republican senators aren't happy with his rebuke.
He got a load off his chest, obviously, but unfortunately, he put a load on the back of Republicans. I think his speech is an outlier regarding how Republicans feel about all this.
He has to realize, as our leader, what he says reflects on us.
Right. He's representing the entire caucus.
I didn't particularly like it.
Let's discuss now. CNN political commentators Alice Stewart and Anna Navarro both here. Good evening to both of you. Good to see you. Alice, let's talk about this McConnell. Clearly, he's trying to have it both ways by appealing to moderate Republicans, yet trying not to anger the base. Is that strategy going to work, or is he all but ensured that Trump will remain a force in the GOP by not voting to convict?
Well, time will tell if it will work, right, Don? I think it's really makes no sense whatsoever for him to try and have it both ways and talk out of both sides of his mouth. Here he is. He makes the ultimate vote not to convict the president, but condemns him. He talks the big talk, but doesn't walk the walk with regard to a conviction. And in addition to that, coming out now and saying that he's a private citizen and he can face charges outside of that, I think that takes the responsibility off of the people that had the decision to make the tough choice. And look, he can sit there and say with a straight face that the president was morally responsible for this and try to wash his hands of this. But I think Republicans should have done what Republican attorney Chuck Cooper suggested and judged this based on the merits of the president's misconduct and made a vote to convict. But hiding behind this has been unconstitutional, I think, was a cop-out. And I feel like there should have been certainly more done by Republicans in the Senate to hold the former president accountable for his actions that led to the insurrection at the Capitol.
Yeah, that whole not constitutional was BS. That was a real argument because they had deemed it constitutional before, and it had the force of law behind it, but they chose to hide behind that, and they thought it was a good way to get out, a good escape. So listen, Anna, Trump's allies are not happy with McConnell, as you know. But what about the Republicans who did decide to stand up against Trump? Are they going to have any faith in him after this?
Look, I think this has been a huge blow to Mitch McConnell as a leader. Let's remember, until a month ago, he was majority leader. He's now minority leader. But he is grossly derelict of duty when it comes to that word leader. And, you know, I think about McConnell and I think to myself, but for Trump, he probably would be majority leader today. But for Trump talking all that garbage he spoke in Georgia and deflating the Republican vote there, Mitch McConnell would probably be majority leader today. And Mitch McConnell, he worked with the devil. Mitch McConnell is a transactional guy. He packed the federal courts with conservatives with the help of Trump. They did that together. But, we're past that now. And a political party that exists to support one person is not a political party. It is a cult. It might as well be Jim Jones instead of Donald Trump's, or it might as well be David Koresh instead of Donald Trump. It is a cult. A political party needs to stand on convictions and principles and ideas and solutions. And this party that has been talking and lecturing and clutching their pearls about cancel culture for the last 4 years, now wants to cancel Republicans who had the spine to stand up and vote their conscience. What kind of political party penalizes elected officials who vote their conscience? Not who commit crimes, not who do nepotism, not who are corrupt, not who pardon criminals, but who stand up on principle. That's no longer a political party. It is a sham pretending to be a political party. And Mitch McConnell, if he wants to be considered a leader, needs to figure out which side he's on. Yeah. Because straddling the fence is not a good look at this state of his life.
Well, Alice, let me ask you. McConnell, telling this to the Wall Street Journal, when asked about Trump's role going forward, he says, I don't rule out the prospect that he may well be supporting good candidates. I'm not assuming that. To the extent of the former president wants to continue to be involved, he won't be a constructive part of the process. We know what kind of candidates Trump likes. So what's McConnell going to do if we see more in the vein of the Marjorie Taylor Greene types?
Well, then we'll be in serious trouble. Look, it's almost as though we're in a situation where you're trying to break up with someone, but you're trying to say, really, it's not you, it's me. And we need to just rip the Band-Aid off and acknowledge the fact that since the former president has been in the White House, we have lost the House, we've lost the Senate, and we've lost the White House. So why would we continue to go down the road of continuing to lose as a Republican Party? And to Anna's point, there have been a lot of people in the Republican Party that have gravitated toward the personality of the party as opposed to the policies of the party. We need to get back to the founding principles of the Republican Party for lower taxes, limited government, fiscal responsibility, immigration, Second Amendment rights, and focus on that. Continuing to support the former president and what he plans to do moving forward is revenge politics and putting primary opponents against those who have spoken out or taken action against him. That is not a winning formula. I do believe the former president will have some undue influence on the short term. The real question, Don, I think will be his kids. What does Ivanka want to do? What does Laura Trump want to do? And Don Jr. If they want to have staying power, they potentially will have staying power. But I would like to think that the cooler heads in the Republican Party will prevail and understand we have lost too many powers in Washington, D.C. to continue to have former President Trump be the voice in the face of the Republican Party. It is not a winning formula, and it's not a way to move forward.
Well, we'll see. As you said at the beginning, only time will tell. Thank you both. I appreciate it. Most Republicans refuse to convict Trump. That's one thing. But then take this. Lindsey Graham is now threatening someone else with potential impeachment. Vice President Kamala Harris.
Because that's what makes us whole.
Take this. Senator Lindsey Graham looking for payback now that former President Trump's been acquitted in his second impeachment trial. Graham insists anything Trump said leading up to the deadly insurrection is what Graham calls, and I quote here, politically protected speech. Tell that to the family of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who lost his life after defending lawmakers and our democracy. Well, yesterday on state TV news, Graham not only defended the former president, claiming the trial was unconstitutional, he threatened someone else with impeachment.
We've opened Pandora's box to future presidents. And if you use this model, I don't know how Kamala Harris doesn't get impeached if the Republicans take over the House, because she actually bailed out rioters, and one of the rioters went back to the streets and broke somebody's head open. So we've opened Pandora's box here.
So Lindsey is reaching, right? Now, if you're wondering what all this Pandora's box talk is about, this is a story. After the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis last spring, thousands of people, including Black Lives Matter supporters, took to the streets. Kamala Harris tweeted support for donations to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which helped people post bail if they were arrested while protesting. So let's set the record straight. There was no bailing out, right? Kamala Harris tweeted about a fund to help people post bail, which is entirely legal. Stop it, Lindsey. You guys know better than that. Well, maybe you don't. Donald Trump incited an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. People were killed. Our elected representatives had to run for their lives. Our democracy was in peril. There's no comparison.